Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of a vibrant and insightful 19-year-old son, Joe, who is struggling to find his path. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We both are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Today's guest is Lanise Antoine Shelley. She's an intercountry transracial adoptee from Haiti, and she hosts the podcast When They Were Young, Amplifying Voices of Adoptees. Residing in Chicago, she's a very busy actor and director with theater, TV, and film credits a mile long, and she's also an amazing self-taught visual artist. In our conversation, we plan to unravel the dominant narratives in adoption and discuss how we can all be anti-racist within the adoption community. No small task. Thank you for being here, Lanise. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you for having me, Beth. I am honored to be here.
This is just going to be a nice, light little conversation, right?
Yeah, just a comedy.
All right. So make sure you're in a good space, everybody, and dig in with us. Mm-hmm. So I always like to have people introduce themselves and share their adoption story. I think it's so important for everyone to listen to adoptee stories, and particularly adoptive parents. I think that's the best thing we can do, is just hear with an open mind people's adoption stories. So tell us whatever parts of your adoption story you'd like to share.
Well, I was born Lanise Antoine in Saint Michel, Haiti, and I was put in an orphanage around the age of 2. But the orphanage at the time, called Haiti Home for Children in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, it was very much a daycare, and it has since progressed to becoming a school and a children's hospital. So it had a lot of different facilities and uses and resources that the community at large could tap into. Mm-hmm. And so my family that was present, I wasn't, as the definition of orphan being one without parents, one or more parent. I had both of my parents at the time, and I had siblings and a family that was ever present and loving and doting. But at that time, my adoptive mother, Carla Shelley, was a missionary doing work at the orphanage. And her second year in Haiti, she decided to adopt 2 kids. And she adopted another little girl named Marie-Claude Jean-Pierre and myself, and took us to Chico, California, where we were raised. And our names were changed from Marie-Claude Jean-Pierre to Jessie Marie Shelley. And my name became Lanise Ann Shelley. And in high school, I changed my name back to Antoine, which is kind of prevalent in the adoption community. When adoptees come out of the fog, they reclaim their names, they change their names, they kind of grow a sense of ownership with every part of themselves, because growing up, for a lot of us, we feel like we are not our own. Our surroundings are set up and curated by other people, and we don't have a sense of ownership. And so it's vital to feel a sense of connectivity to your name, to your environment, and to the people that you choose to love. And so I grew up in Chico, California, and just typical suburban life, right? And my mom, she adopted me and my sister as a single parent. And she's a white woman. So her whole family's white. And I grew up in a white community. And I didn't start making Black or BIPOC friends until middle school. And then I didn't start loving my skin and my Blackness and my culture and the differences that made up me until undergrad, when I was surrounded by Black people that were so proud to be Black, so proud to be richly melanated and educated, and they were doing like marvelous things in the world and were very inspiring to me. So they're the ones who modeled what it would be like and what it was like to really love the skin that you're in and to embrace your history, your identity, and what it is that you want. And so that's essentially my story.
Wow. That's beautiful. And I'm glad that you eventually found people that really helped you to love yourself from the standpoint of your race and not just your looks, but your ethnicity and your deep roots into your culture of Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
Did you meet other Haitian people too, or all sorts of Black people from all sorts of places?
Well, I didn't meet other Haitians. I met Africans, though,
Okay.
because I started to really dig deeply into African dance. And I saw myself in a lot of African cultures and traditions. And I went to Senegal and I was just, I thought they were my people, you know, even though I've been back to Haiti twice and I've met my biological family.
Okay.
And I somewhat was reunified with them, but I never reintegrated because I was 4 when I was adopted and my sister was 5 and we didn't know English. And I had to learn English and it took me years to learn English. And so essentially my language, my food, my whole environment was ruptured at the age of 4. And I say this, like, I just want to preface everything that I say with, I do love my mom, Carla, and it is essential that we in the adoption constellation understand the paradox. There are numerous paradoxes in adoption, right? Like I can love my mom in a way that feels deeply cellular and also hold her accountable for the missteps that occurred during my adoption, during my upbringing, and ways in which she did not support me. She did not protect me. Yeah. And we as adoptees really need to feel that we have room for that kind of accountability because biological children hold their parents accountable.
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
You know, and if we are playing the same game, like this is my family, just as if you had me from your womb, then I have every right to hold you accountable as well.
And how has that worked with your mom?
She's been quite receptive, actually.
Yay.
She's been reading and educating herself and all of those things, but she had to and still continues to have an inner reckoning, right? Because there were so many red flags that she did not notice growing up. For instance, she told me about 2 years ago that my sister and I cried for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And there's a really great podcast called the Enneagram podcast. And I am a type 1. I don't know if anyone out there relates to the Enneagram, but it's a great way to process trauma. And my mom listened to this podcast, and the hostess is an adoptee. And she talked about grief in adoption and how so many children are not given the space, given the language, given the opportunity to grieve the life that they lived before. And whether the child was a newborn or 4-year-old like myself or 9-year-old like my aunt, they have a history that you cannot deny. I think a lot of adoptive parents get swept up in their dream for a family that they forget that this child is coming from a rich history. And that history cannot be denied. And so when I came to the States, my mom had no idea that this 4-year-old who was fluent in Creole, who missed her mother, her grandmother, her siblings, but didn't have the language to articulate as much, right? Who missed her foods, her favorite foods. The climate is completely different in California, you know? And no one explained to me what was happening. No one asked me whether I wanted to participate. And so a lot of the grief in adoption is overlooked. And honestly, I have the past 3 years been processing and grieving and working through so many things that I couldn't when I was a child.
Yeah, when you're a child, you don't have the language or the tools or the cognitive ability to work through it. So it becomes imperative that the adoptive parents have a clue going into this. And a lot of us had no one telling us anything I don't know what kind of information your mom got, but I got nothing. But I adopted my son from Japan, and they gave me like literally zero tools. They didn't say your child has been relinquished and will have trauma no matter what you do. They didn't tell me anything like that. They didn't tell me there's going to be a cultural issue. There's going to be, I'm not giving myself a bunch of excuses, but I'm saying that it's therefore up to us parents to go digging around and finding the information as soon as we can, preferably before you adopt. But whenever you're hearing this, now is the time. If you haven't started doing it, we've got to dig in, because our kids are not like regular kids in a regular family. They come with a bunch of layers already, and we need to know about those layers and do the very best we can. I know we all mess up, but it sounds like your mom is receptive and you're still in communication with your mom, right? It didn't sever your relationship. So that's really good.
Yes, we're in communication. I think that we're in a sticky patch right now because other things are coming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
With all of the nuances and the unearthing of these expectations and truths and things like that, but also in response to what's happening in the world, right?
Yeah. It's probably not a really easy time to be Black right now.
Exactly. It's not. I mean, has it ever been?
Yeah. When has it
never
been? Yeah,
been
exactly.
an easy time to be Black. And I appreciate you acknowledging, Beth, that you weren't given the resources. You didn't seek the resources.
No, I didn't seek them either. Right.
Yeah. And you didn't know where to begin. And right now, there are so many different ways in which people can get tapped into this education, right? Mm-hmm. My podcast, When They Were Young, there are a plethora of other podcasts out there. One of my guests, Isaac Eder, who's an adoptee consultant, he just launched some practical guides, and you can get 15% off. If you go to my podcast and you scroll down to the show notes, you get 15% off on the link for practical guides on Black hair care and practical guides on transracial adoption.
Great.
And so there are so many people out there who are ready and willing and poised to support these families, educate these people. But to be frank, a lot of people go into adoption just blinded by their vision for a family and thinking that the better life narrative will get them through it. And that is not the case.
Yeah. Tell us about the better life narrative for those that aren't familiar.
Yeah, well, the better life narrative is this idea that adoption, no matter what, generally speaking, will afford this child a better life than they had before. And that is not necessarily the case. And it's such a harmful way in which approaching adoption, because you are discounting, devaluing a great majority of adoptees' experiences that are not good. They experience abuse, they experience neglect, they experience microaggression, racism across the board, right? Adoptees are overrepresented in therapy. Adoptees are the highest demographic for suicides and the highest demographic for homelessness. And people are unaware of this truth. And it's because of what is being peddled and what is being overlooked when it comes down to supporting these adoptees through this traumatic experience of losing their family. Right? And so the better life, there is no such thing, even with all of my resources and education and experiences. I do not think that this is necessarily a better life because, one, it's such an arrogant statement, right?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
We all measure happiness, contentment, satisfaction differently. And my metric for happiness is, there's a quote that says, the quality of your life is only as good as the relationships within it.
Nice.
And if that is true, then my life leaves a lot to be desired.
It seems like the better life narrative is all about money. Like, oh, you were in an orphanage. Well, in Haiti, which is a very poor country. And of course, it would be better to be in a wealthier country. But that just is only one very small piece of a life.
That's exactly right.
But you were taken away from so much else. And please help me understand. You said you have both of your parents, or you had at the time, both of your parents. I'm not sure if they're still alive. You'll tell me that. And siblings. And so why were you in an orphanage and why were you adoptable?
Well, we were the first to be adopted at that orphanage.
Oh.
We were the very first two.
Wow.
And they hadn't been doing adoptions until that moment.
Wow.
And we were in the orphanage because it serves as a daycare as well, right?
Like your parents didn't have money to take care of the daily needs. And so.
Yeah, or a weekly need or an hourly need.
Okay.
And so you can drop off your kid there, right? And sometimes I think my grandmother actually worked as one of the house mothers as well.
Okay.
So it was just like a trade-off, right? And it's just a different way of approaching community support and service.
Sure.
Another thing that people should understand is that there are several narratives being peddled when it comes to adoption, because a lot of times the birth families are being told something completely different.
Oh.
And that is the catalyst for a great majority of adoptions, right? Is deceit.
They were lied to then.
Yes. And so when I reunified with my mother, she believed that I would come back to Haiti at the age of 18. Like this would be just like a sleepaway camp, you know? And of course that never happens. But so many of these birth families are told that in these developing countries. That is what is the impetus and the drive to relinquishing their child. And so it's really essential to understand that there is a backstory that can be a bit sordid and dark when it comes to what's happening on the birth family side, right? Because everything, marketing and support and resources are all geared towards the adoptive parent.
Yep.
Everything else is secondary. And so once you understand that, you will be able to discard the better life narrative, because that better life narrative does not support the adoptee. It does not support the birth family. It only encourages the adoptive parent.
Yeah. It's a very limiting belief, and it commodifies the adoptee. You're a product and you get transferred from one place to the next, like a rental car or something. You know?
Exactly. Well, it's trafficking. There's an element of human trafficking to it because there is a transaction.
It's very transactional. Yeah.
You are giving money to this organization, to this family, and then you receive a child, right?
Yeah. Intercountry adoptions are particularly fraught, I think, with that trafficking kind of element. And it's really tough. It must be really difficult to just live with that as your reality. Like, how do you deal with that on the day-to-day?
That is a great question, right? And I'm still processing that. And I think a lot of adoptees are processing that, right? I have a lot of healing modalities that I tap into. Meditation, yoga, holistic living, mindful living. I have a therapist. I just found a therapist who is a Black interracial adoptee, which is like, it is miraculous indeed that I was able to find someone who can absolutely empathize with what it is that I am going through on a visceral level. And so it is essential that this work is applied to those families that have young adopted kids. And this work is applied to families that want a deeper, intimate connection with their adult adoptee. Because this work continues. Like my mom is realizing that she's not done being a parent. You know what I mean? And this is the truth for biological parents. You don't stop being a parent.
Things shift, but you're going to be needed as a parent forever. My son just turned 19 a few months ago, but when they turn 18, they don't ever have to talk to you again. So if you want to have a relationship with your adult child, you've got to continue working at the relationship. And so it can continue, everybody can continue growing.
Well, I love that you said that. Continue working on the relationship and understanding that you're not entitled to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And no parent is entitled to intimacy with their child.
No.
And so that is something that I think my mom is confronted with, because the bedrock of adoption is this sense of entitlement. Once you have this child is quote unquote indebted to you. This child, quote unquote, should be grateful to you. And if they don't acquiesce to your requests and commands, if they don't come across as deeply appreciative and, in a sense, docile, then what was all of this for, right?
Yeah.
And that is a very dangerous mindset to be in, because that is a supremacist mindset of ownership. You do not own this child. Yes, there was a transaction that you went through to receive this child, but understand that you cannot approach the adoptee, no matter what age they are, with a sense of ownership.
Yeah, I bet that's very triggering, to feel like you're a piece of property and that you have the right or the inherent right as an adoptive parent to control anybody. That's really, that would feel terrible. Do you think if someone was a transracial parent of an adopted kid that they adopted from somewhere else, or even domestically, but transracial, right away find a transracial adoptee therapist like you found? Did you wish you would have had that much sooner?
Yes.
Is it too early to start therapy? Like, when is too early?
Well, I think starting therapy as soon as the child becomes self-aware, is essential. I remember having therapists, and this is a misstep, and I know this now in hindsight, that my mother took me to a white male therapist. And she was not aware that I needed to see myself, in order for me to feel safe.
At least one of those intersections you got. And I assume the white male was not adopted either.
No,
so.
He wasn't. Yeah. And so he could prescribe an idea to me, but he would never empathize. He could never truly sympathize. And I, as a child being empathic, knew that I was not safe to really divulge what it was that was hurting me. And so now that I'm an adult and know that I need to see reflections of myself, just like everyone else, right? And so many white people, because this is a white dominant culture, have the luxury of seeing themselves all the time. So they don't think about it.
They don't realize it.
Realize that people like myself do not feel safe in many situations. Like, for instance, I used to, and I still do, in public, I call my mother mère, which is the French word for mom, because as a child, I felt outed when I would call her mom in public, and everyone would immediately know that I was adopted, know my whole life story. And so I'd call her mère, and she'd respond to it, and I could keep my secret.
Oh, at what age did you start that?
I think I started that pretty early, around 12 or 10 or something like that. There's a level of shame, but I didn't know it was shame. I didn't know it was a sense of vulnerability, hangover that I had.
And did your mom respond okay when you wanted to change how you called her?
Yeah, she was fine, because we spoke French here and there. You know what I mean?
Because she was in Haiti for 2 years, so she knew French. Or
she knew some Creole.
They speak French and Creole there?
Yes, yes. And so it was like a game that we played, right?
Okay.
And honestly, I didn't know. Now, as an adult, a fully fledged, self-possessed adult, I know that that was the reason why. But at 10 and 12, I was like, I just don't feel comfortable for some reason. Let me just call her something else, without completely disrespecting her. And so I found a way to adjust. But those are little like micro pivots that a lot of adoptees have to make by themselves, because no one's supporting them.
Yeah. And I could imagine an adoptive parent would have pushed back. I'm glad your mother didn't, but I can imagine an adoptee especially in their teenage years, is trying to navigate, trying to find something that's comfortable for them or make it a little more comfortable, right? And adoptive parent could get in their way of that and say, no, you can't change what you're calling me, or you can't change your name, or you can't whatever, find Black people to hang out with. No, 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 no. And we get in the way. So I'm hearing you say that we need to let our adopted kids find their spaces and find their way, and we need to just be supportive.
That's exactly right. And being supportive in a way that doesn't micromanage their experience.
Yes, because we have no idea.
Exactly.
We really don't know.
And you had no idea when you adopted us, but you had a vision.
Yes.
And your vision is not going to be fulfilled. You have to make peace with that. Like, the adoptive child is grieving the life that they had, and you are grieving the vision that you had.
Yes.
And both of you have to find some way for homeostasis in order to reconnect without completely dumping wounds and harms and projections of aches and pains at each other, right? And it's so difficult. And that's why doing your own work is essential for you to come back together with your adoptive child and feel a sense of, okay, I can allow them to hold their own space and hold their own identity without feeling threatened when they seek out their biological family. That doesn't mean that I get less of their love. It just means that they are seeking their true north, their self, and they deserve that. If I love them, they deserve that fulfillment.
Definitely.
I will not begrudge them a deep, centered, rooted relationship with themselves. And that's what that is.
I really hope that any adoptive parent or ally is just soaking this in. It's so important. And it's so hard to do. Speaking from experience, it's hard to let go of what you thought things would look like in your family's life. It is so hard, and too bad, because we adopted you. And it is our job to do the very best we can to give you the tools you need to get through this difficult life. You know, our adopted kids have many extra layers of problems, and it's not an easy time to be a kid or, you know, a person in this life right now. This is just a terribly difficult time, but you add transracial onto it, you add intercountry onto it, you add just adoption trauma, period. It's just a lot. So whatever we parents can do to help make their lives better and not add to the fire, not add to it.
Yeah.
The last couple of years with, you know, the murder of George Floyd and just all the continuing, all of the police violence, and it just seems like it's just so bad right now, the last couple of years. I mean, it's always been bad, but how are you navigating that? Or how would you suggest that families navigate that, especially transracial families?
Well, I would say in 2020, I was inactivated. I was inactive, right?
Okay.
And then in the time when there was so much visible racial unrest, I became activated.
Okay.
And I wanted to address the fact that as an interracial adoptee, I couldn't go to my mom and really discuss what was happening in the world because she did not understand it. This is a dynamic where even when she comes to visit me in Chicago, to this day, everyone always asks her first, can I help you? And then they ask me. They never think we're together. They never know we're together. I took her to a health food store because I'm plant-based, and my family is always asking for tips on like holistic living. And I was showing them around my favorite health food store, and the associate comes up to us and she thought that I was a random person and was just like, can I help? What's happening here? Can I help you? And my mom and godmother were like, we're fine. But they had never noticed that until 2020.
Okay.
And I started to challenge them with, I need overt support from you, public support. I don't know exactly what that looks like, whether it be posting on social media, Black Lives Matter, whether it be reading the books on anti-racism, understanding that these conversations need to be had in these homes, because I never had these conversations before. And my mom and my relatives just kind of brushed it under the rug because they were so focused on trying to make me fit in. And Brene Brown, I just listened to this really great episode about belonging with Brene Brown, and she talked about the antithesis to belonging is fitting in, because you are assimilating and shifting yourself in order to blend in with people rather than them accepting who you are, where you are, you know?
Yes.
And so I challenged my family to not ask me to fit in, but to ask me to belong.
Wow, that's profound.
Yeah. And that shifted everything, right? And they have been engaged in a lot of the learning, but unfortunately, I had to initiate a lot of the learning, and it would have meant so much more to me had my mom already had figured out how to create a post or find a post that said Adoptive Families Against Racism. And I created those posts, and they're on my Instagram for people to screenshot and repost and things like that. Just understanding that your life experience as a white person is vastly different from mine and will always be. And for you to say that that is not the truth hurts me down to my marrow. That hurts me.
Yeah.
And are you okay with harming me in that way? Whether you understand the harm is obsolete, but knowing that you inflicted and pierced me through with devaluing and disregarding the fact that my life is different because of the color of my skin. And so these are the conversations that I encourage people to have as early as possible, because kids are able to understand differences and nuances at the age of 2 and 4.
Yeah.
And so for parents to think that, oh, they're fine, you know, they're fitting in. You don't want your kid to fit in, right?
Not as good as belonging.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very different. And it takes a lot of intentionality. I read, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I'm starting to put it together. It's more than just listening and being open. It is actually doing stuff, like doing the stuff, being proactive and not just laying back and, cheering people on TV or whatever. It's like, you actually have to make the signs. You have to actually make the conversations happen. And white people and parents of transracially adopted kids, that's on us to actually be the ones starting these conversations, because asking our kids to be the ones to start it, that's laying a whole bunch more stuff on them. Right?
Yep.
You guys are the ones that are oppressed, and Black people in general. We can't expect you guys to teach us.
Yes.
That's not your job. You're the ones that are being oppressed. We've got to figure it out on our own, or, do what we can, read actual history books, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, there's plenty of resources out there. Go read some books.
Yeah. Engage. Yeah.
Figure it out, and don't rely on our transracially adopted kids to help us with this. We need to be proactively getting the information and helping in the way that we can. And then hopefully our kids will be honest and responsive and tell us if we're going in the wrong direction or something. But is that what you wish adoptive parents would be doing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And I loved that you said it's in the doing of it. It's active, right? And
yes,
there's something that propels you forward and inspires you to engage. And so anti-racism isn't just not being racist. Not being racist is just sitting there being silent rather than calling somebody a derogatory term, right?
Yeah.
But being
that's better than that, but
right. But being anti-racist, right?
Much different.
Is learning about the history of that derogatory word or phrase or term and choosing to teach other people not to use the word.
Right.
So that is completely different, right? There's something proactive.
Standing up to other white people saying that. Yes.
Yeah, there's something proactive and indelible about anti-racism. And it's essential in the adoption constellation that we engage in anti-racism, because in truth, adoption was built to support the supremacy of white people. And a lot of people are going to bristle at that, but these truths are hard to swallow, because if you think about the history of missionaryism, about what happened when white people came into these communities and they put them through concentration camps or civilized them, quote unquote, right? They took away their,
like the Native American communities.
Exactly, the Native American communities, just around the world, the indigenous peoples, right? And it was all in the name of civilizing them,
quote unquote.
I would recommend watching Rabbit Proof Fence. It's about the genocide of the Aborigines in the 1970s and how the British literally charted out how they would systematically breed out the Aboriginal gene by abducting the children of the Aborigines, creating a fence that separated the white people from the Aborigines, called the Rabbit Proof Fence.
Oof.
They would abduct the kids, put them into these concentration camps that taught them like needlework and how to be a cobbler, how to basically be a help, right? Taught them Christianity. And then they would assign them to various houses in the cities, hoping that they would breed with a white person and eventually breed out the Aboriginal gene, right?
Oof.
And so these kids were fostered by these families. And so this is the history, which is dark.
It is very dark.
It's very dark. And so it didn't become in pursuit of an extension of familial bonds until maybe the 50s or so. That's when people understood that, well, not really understood, but they decided to use adoption as a means to fix infertility. So they thought, oh, well, let's do that, right? That's an option. And then the marketing shifted to support that narrative. But in the beginning, it was really about the ethnic cleansing of certain areas.
Oh yeah, definitely. The horrible history we have with the Native Americans and it's coming out more and more, Canada and the US. It's absolutely horrible. And they didn't keep it a secret that they were trying to eliminate, the Indianness of these kids. That was definitely extremely intentional.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that happens often especially in, I don't even know, is third world country still the word to use for places like Haiti?
Yeah, you can say third world or developing country.
Okay. Developing. Oh yeah, developing. Especially in developing countries where they're at risk for being manipulated and used. And, it's just fraught. It's fraught with many, many layers of difficulty and options for unethical behavior.
Absolutely. And then that circles back to the better life narrative, right? Because a lot of these adoptions, again, they create a breeding ground for unethical behavior.
Yeah. And it just promulgates and it just continues and continues. Do you get a lot of pushback when you talk about these things?
I haven't yet.
Okay, good.
I haven't.
I'm wondering if we'll get some letters.
I'm sure it's coming, but I think that I've been fortunate enough to be around people who are just wanting to learn and have really released the ego and the sense of white knuckling that adoption is just all good, right?
Yeah. The black and white kind of narrative.
Yeah, very binary.
It's either all good or all bad, right?
And it's not binary. And as I said in the very beginning, you have to make peace with these paradoxes, right? I'm not coming for anyone specifically. I want to educate people on the system itself, on the system at large.
Yes.
And if you are in the adoption constellation and you are committed to having better relationships with your adoptee, if you are committed to bettering the world, it is essential that you are able to ingest some of these hard truths.
Yes, I agree. I agree totally. And if one is listening to this and is incredibly triggered or angry or like fired up because of this conversation. What would you suggest? I have a couple of ideas. What would you suggest that they do if a birth parent or an adoptive parent or a community member that's not even in the adoption constellation, if they're hearing these ideas of commodification and trafficking and like, whoa, what would be your suggestion for their next step if they're willing to continue down this road of learning?
I would just say, take a deep breath. Know that no one is attacking you, right? You are safe.
I don't even hear you attacking your mother.
Yeah.
You speak very honorably about your mother, that she knew what she knew at the time and she's working hard. And I don't hear you blasting anybody.
Yeah. And I don't. And my approach with my podcast and my work is adoptee centered, right? I want to protect, honor, and just amplify adoptees and their truths and their stories, good, bad, ugly, and disastrous, like whatever it happens to be. And so I am committed to that. And so therefore, I'm letting go of my vision for perfection, right? And I implore those who may bristle at some of the things that I've said to really be honest with, who are you? Are you a BIPOC person? Are you a non-BIPOC person? And I have yet to activate a BIPOC person in a negative way, right?
Because they're all like, yep, I get it. I get it.
Exactly. So let's just be honest about that, right?
Who are the people getting reactive, right?
Who are the people getting reactive? And then understanding what exactly activated you. Was it because you felt that I had shamed you or I had made you feel wrong in some way? Because I didn't. That's you projecting your story onto what it is that I'm saying. I'm not coming for anyone specifically. I am just relaying the information, which is vast, that I have acquired throughout the years and through my lived experience.
Yes, which is the most important piece of that.
Yeah.
That's more important than any book there is. You have the lived experience and we need to just listen to you. Just listen to you.
Yeah. And also,
and believe you.
Believe me, but also understand that I'm here for people's triumph. Like I'm here on this podcast solely because I want you, whoever you are that's listening, to win. I do.
Yeah. We want our kids to have a better life. Yeah. Like we adoptive parents. If you look deep inside, you would want your kid to have the best life possible, right?
Yes.
Everybody would say that, except maybe the psychopath or something. But if that is the truth, then we have to do some hard work on ourselves and some digging. Ugh.
Yeah.
It's tough stuff. It's tough stuff, but it's doable.
Yeah, it's doable, right? And there's some really awesome things that come out of it. It's pivoting your frame of thinking as well, is that you get to do this work with your beloved, right?
Yes.
You get to learn more about their culture, about who they are, what they like and don't like. You get to share this life with them in a more vast, deeper, and more intimate way. And that is a gift, right? And that's part of the vision. That's part of the initial vision, right? And so this is just a stepping stone towards that, and understanding that it is here to be a catalyst towards what it is that you ultimately want.
I believe that my son's crisis that occurred when he was 15, so 4.5 years ago, was the biggest gift to me because it forced us to look at a whole bunch of stuff that we were totally ignoring. We were just kind of like, just kind of walking on the surface of life. And I thought I was happy, but boy, he, had a mental health crisis and we found out he was addicted. And I thought my world was falling apart. But looking back, that horrible, horrible, horrible thing that happened, luckily he survived, was the catalyst to create this much closer relationship with my son, with my wife. I've deepened my understanding of myself to a tremendous amount. I've done it like a deep dive in my own personal growth. And so I'm very grateful now if you would have asked me if I wanted to go on this journey, I probably would have said, hell no. But I didn't have much of a choice. But these journeys take us, and I hope that's what's also happening with you and your mom, that eventually that you will all realize, oh, okay, this has brought us so much closer and better people, in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the goal, I think, is for everyone to be on a trajectory of growth. How can I learn from this? What is this trying to teach me? And just go toward it if you possibly can.
Go toward
Right?
it. Yes.
Oh
Yes.
man. It's not easy though, believe me. But I will say that the White Fragility book and the How to Be an Anti-Racist book were really good for me. And if that helps any other white people, those are really good books, very common, popular books that people are reading. And there's so many resources out there for transracial adoptees. Adoption Mosaic is doing great things. Dr. Shatra Werteliker, she is amazing, doing some really great work on transracial adoption. And she's a therapist too. And she's written books for children. And she has an amazing directory of adoptee therapists. So there's so many resources out there. And I'm happy to help if anyone's looking for resources. I'll put a bunch of that stuff I just mentioned in the show notes. Are there any other resources that you particularly want to highlight besides your awesome podcast?
Well, I have a resource page on my website at laniseantoineshelley.com. And it is an accumulation of everyone that I've met, everyone that inspires me, and those who I have connected with on the social medias. So I suggest people go there. Other than that, I can't think of anyone on the huge list that I have.
Yeah. And there's so much out there. I think people really have no excuse now to, find resources. It's, Google it. It's fine. There's tons. And there are people like Lanise out there sharing her story. Are you open to people contacting you directly, or do you want them just to follow you on Facebook or something? Or
Well, if you follow me on Instagram at Young Adoptee or my personal Instagram at Lantoinez, you can DM me and I always respond. But yeah, feel free to reach out and ask me questions. And then if you're going to ask a question though, you have to rate and review my podcast,
there you go.
So,
yes.
So you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours.
There you go. That's a good deal. Very good. Is there anything else you'd like to share that hasn't been brought up yet, or anything else I've left out?
I think that this was a really robust conversation. And thank you so much, Beth, for making space for this conversation, for being one of those who are so deeply courageous enough to say that, hey, there are spaces and places in which I could have pivoted. Let me learn more for the sake of my son, for the sake of myself, and for the sake of this world. And so I just want to commend you for that depth and that curiosity and that willingness to be a little uncomfortable for that greater good.
Yeah, thank you. And I am not anything special, I promise you. I am just struggling and stumbling around, and everyone can do this. It's not brain surgery. Just ask forgiveness when you goof up, you guys. But just go. You can do it. We can all learn and grow. And yeah, like you said, for the world, I mean, it's some tough times out there.
Yeah.
We all need to just do better.
Yeah.
And especially for our adopted kids. So, well, thank you so much for doing this. I very much appreciate it. I appreciate knowing you now, and I'll continue listening to your wonderful podcast and following all of your artistic endeavors. And follow Unraveling Adoption too when you're on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We have a Patreon account. If you're interested in helping support the show with as little as $5 a month, you can donate to patreon.com, and it directly comes right to me so I can continue this commercial-free podcast. And I want to make sure everybody knows that I do have an adoptive parent support group called Aptitude, and it is open to any adoptive or foster or kinship parents that's willing to go this direction and look at this tough stuff. We have a private Facebook group, a monthly speaker forum, a book club, where right now we're studying Anne Heffron's wonderful memoir, You Don't Look Adopted. And we have a database full of resources for adoptive parents. So please check that out. You can find it on our website, unravelingadoption.com/aptitude, or just find me and I will share you the information. Please share this with any adoptive families. You know, this is my big heart, is to help other adoptive families so they know the stuff that I didn't know. I want to help other parents to not make the same mistakes I did. So thank you again, Lanise. This was a big feast of a meal. This was no little delicate ice cream. We had a big giant feast today. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to anyone who stuck around through this difficult conversation. I hope it really helps inform you and motivates you to keep growing and keep learning. So thank you all for listening. Lanise and I want you all to stay safe.